So today we are going to discuss last class we have discussed about the culture and nature, and today we'll discuss about the another very important concept. Bapalu had so we'll discuss about the culture and cultural ecology, and prior to that I'll have already told you earlier, and also what exactly culture and how the culture and cultural ecology are linked. It is a more extensive what exactly we discussed earlier. We are discussing in a more kind of elaborative and more kind of descriptive way. See, whenever we are telling the culture, again I am repeating, we are including the behaviors, beliefs, the meaning, materials, mental, social products. Then if you say the integrated, if you look at the culture, culture is shared and integrated, it is learned, it is symbolic, it is adaptive, it is ethnocentrism versus cultural relativism. So all this concept we are going to discuss. So if you look at this, the basic definition of culture, the culture or civilization taken in wide ethnographic sense, what exactly the E.V. Taylor was telling, that he was telling that culture is that complex whole which includes the knowledge, beliefs, arts, morals, law, customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of a particular society. Then the very another famous anthropologist, that Clifford Geertz, who is have you ever heard this name of Clifford Geertz? So
No,
he
sir.
has actually mostly he's quite famous, a cognitive anthropologist, and he's basically gave a theory called symbolic anthropology, and specifically the Clifford Geertz. Mostly the people even in the psychology and all who works on cognitive areas, they used to follow the Clifford Geertz theories, and specifically he was telling an example in the context of symbolic interpretation. He was telling that culture is the framework of beliefs, expressive symbols, and values in terms of which individuals define their feelings and make their judgments. See, he has written a very excellent books on this on technology and agriculture, specifically how the new technology has an impact on agriculture and all, and specifically on agrarian relation, not exactly on agrarian relationship, but on the agricultural community. And he was in the Balino society. He was giving an example of cock fighting. He was telling that when the two cocks are fighting, he was telling that uh, it is not that cocks are fighting, rather two communities are fighting. The two community, because whenever generally those who are from even from Odisha, they might be well aware, in Mayurbhanj, Keonjhar district of Odisha, specifically in tribal region, during the Makar Sankranti, now 14th November, January is coming. During this Makar Sankranti, they used to involve in cock fighting. The different community used to be engaged in cock fighting, and that exactly the Clifford Geertz was telling that it is not that cock is fighting, rather the two communities are fighting, which is symbolized, symbolized in the form of that two societies are fighting. So 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 that's why here what exactly the Clifford was telling, that how the two communities are fighting, it is not that two cocks are fighting. So you see, if you look at the cow worship in India, because as we are discussing about the culture and cultural ecology, the how the Indian philosophy, Indian culture claims that we always worship the nature and cows. because cow as a major contributor to the Indian agriculture, and India is a country of agriculture, so that's why in India we have a philosophy of worshipping the cows, because sometimes what happen, all of you know that mostly in our country sometimes taking the cow slaughter into account, lots of carnage is being held, people are fighting with the religious with the different religious communities are fighting, but in reality if you look into the importance of cow and all, and how the cow is linked to the religion and ecology and all, it is something different, but we sometimes get into the different kind of conflict, taking it into in a different dimension. Culture of a people can be understood as the system of shared ideas, meanings, explicit and implicit, which a people use to interpret the world and which serve to pattern their behavior. Okay, because so that's why it is very kind of essential to know the culture of a community. So culture is a system, culture is a process. So culture is very implicit, means we go for very in-depth and internal analysis can be done of a society from a cultural perspective. Then explicit means if you look at, to want to understand the external aspect of a culture from outside, you have to do an explicit understanding of the culture. So then let us come to the cultural ecology. There are actually in the ecology generally we divided into two aspects. One is human ecology, another is cultural ecology. And wherever we are telling human ecology, mostly we deals with the biological ecology. That's how biologically the human being is adapting to the culture. That is called biological ecology. Another is cultural ecology, how the culture is helping the human beings in adapting to the environment. Because you see, when we adapt to the ecology, when we adapt to the changing environment, we adapt in a two different way. Either biologically we are adapting, otherwise we are culturally trying to adapt ourselves to the existing environment or existing ecology or existing society. So when any human beings living in this earth is always having an interaction with their local environment. So what exactly they are doing? They are trying to adapt to the changing environment in the to the local environment. Because this is the intention of human beings, to adopt. Either we are biologically adapting, otherwise culturally adapting. So we are here now going to discuss the cultural ecology in the sense how the human being is culturally adapting to the changing environment. Because you see, sometimes what happen, wherever right now you have not because there are lots of you are from different parts of India. Suppose whenever you visit when I Raurkela will open, you people will back here, and then slowly what you will do, you have to learn that how we have to do deal here culturally with the changing environment, with the changing society, how culturally you have to adapt. Anyhow, biologically you have to adapt, because here the climate is extreme. Here you will find the extreme rainfall, extreme cold, and extreme kind of temperature. So maybe some of your states are not having that much extreme climate, but in Odisha, specifically Raurkela, you will find an extreme climates, and you have to biologically adapt. At the same time, whenever you come here, you have to culturally adjust yourself, because suppose food is a cultural element. You cannot blame the food of a particular society that because you never like it doesn't mean that you will scold that your food is bad. So rather you have to culturally adapt, and the way you have to interact with others, the way, because you see, if you look into this, there are some societies, specifically, I think we don't have any students from Tamil Nadu. So if you look into this, specifically, there are some society which is very conservative also. So, and even I have seen some of the central even universities in the state of Tamil Nadu also, they have lots of restriction after the evening and all, the students movement and all. You see, sometimes what happens, the student rebels. They get into the strike, and told this is central university, students coming from different parts of the India, and they have a different culture. But you see, always you should remember that we should have always respect to the local culture, because we should respect to the local environment, local philosophy, local culture. So means we have to culturally adopt to the local environment. So while we are adapting to the local environment, so culture is in a dynamic process. Culture never, I have already told you earlier, the culture is not a very static one. It is very dynamic process, and culture never dies. Culture comes always in a new form, and always what happen now, culture is keeping changing with the passage of time, and because we have to adapt ourselves to the changing environment. So here, whenever we are telling the cultural ecology and our adaptive strategy, we have to look into the environmental setting. Then what kind of environment where we are staying, what exactly that environment needs, that we have to adapt to, what should be our strategy to adapt to that environmental settings. Then we have to understand the technological aspects, the what kind of technology we have, the tools, techniques, the knowledge which we require to adopt ourselves. Then we have to understand the world view, what is the world view, what is the indigenous knowledge, what the general, the publics having the opinions to the local environment. Then we have to understand what are the external forces and institutions are coming up in those areas which is having influence on the local ecology and all. Then if you look at the adaptation, be it is a biological adaptation or cultural adaptation, I have already told you, when the human ecology and the cultural ecology, when we are telling about human ecology, we are mostly thinking about its biological adaptation to the changing environment, to the local environment. Be it biological or cultural, represents a better fit to the specific local environment, not an inevitable stage in a ladder of progress. Like wheel, wings, the pins, the brains are requisite devices for certain purpose, not signs of intrinsic superiority. You see, it is not that when we tell that we have invented the wheels, we have invented new technology, we have the knowledge, the brains here means the knowledge. See here, it is not that we are here for claiming ourselves we are superior, somebody is inferior, because generally the different countries which are highly developed in science and technology, they are all claim that we are superior. That will come how they claim themselves in the perspective of cultural ethnocentrism and cultural relativism and all that we'll discuss. But here, if we look into the adaptation, either we are trying culturally or biologically to fit ourselves into the specific environment by inventing different things from time to time. So the key issues are here: the carrying capacity, upper limit on production and population in a given environment. Because whenever we are telling the cultural adaptability or biological adaptability, mostly now we are focusing on cultural adaptability. So whenever we are telling the adaptability, we have to understand the carrying capacity of that local environment in a particular region. Because that's why I told you, generally, the major problem we are facing, specifically in the context of city and all, that whenever we make a plan for a city, generally we make for 300 years, for 500 years, the carrying capacity. When assuming that what should be in the next 300 year or 500 year, at least, what should the size of population, and how with the rise of population, the demands of population will increase, and how the city can meet the increasing demands of the populations. So means whenever we make a plan for any city, we always look for that, and generally we should not look for 30 years, 50 years or 100 years. Rather we should look about at least 300 years or 500 years or 400 years. Through that the city can be better built up. So that's it. Whenever we are telling about this cultural ecology and adaptation and culture and cultural ecology, we have to understand the about a very we have to do a very interpretation about the local environment and its upper limit of on production and population in a given environment. So then sustainability and stress. We have to understand what kind of stress, what are the size of the population, what kind of stress is coming up in the local environment, what are the dependency of the local peoples in this environment, and to what extent the existing resources can give the sustainability to this increasing demands of the peoples. Then cultural basis of conflict, we have to understand the if the stress got increased and the sustainability becomes a question mark, then what kind of the conflict maybe we expected, what is the cultural basis of conflict may arise. So resource is a factor in the conflict. So actually we have to understand that there are different resources available in a particular local environment, and taking the resource into account, how the different peoples are getting into the conflict with each other, taking resource as a factor. So if you look into that, you see now see suppose you see suppose we are having look into a particular ecological niche you take into. Suppose I'll just tell you about suppose Chilika Lake. If you look into the Chilika Lake, it is there are different communities depending on the water for the survival. The peoples living nearby wants to use this water for their domestic purpose. Some people wants that when the water is they are trying, can this water be used for the agricultural purpose? Some people are trying to do the fish cultivation in that water so that they can survive. And some people wants to use this water for the tourism purpose using the boats and all. So then when different communities having different interest and all of them using the same ecological needs, so there might be a chance of rise of conflict in the sense of using this resource. So since the cultural ecology direct our attention to those aspects of the culture and most related to making a living, anthropologists need to understand the economic system, because you see we have to, when we are trying to understand the ecological, the cultural ecology and all, we have to understand also the economic system of a particular region, because unless and until we understand the economic sustainability, the economic system, then there will be very kind of problematic in the future to discuss about the cultural ecology. All society produce the things they need, right? Because you see, when we are living in a very cultural setting, when we are living in a very ecological setting, so means irrespective of societies, all societies, they produce, that depends upon the local resources to produce the things they need. What exactly they need, they want to produce from the local environment for their supply. Exchange things with each other and people of other societies. What they do, they exchange the things with each other. When whatever they produce, either they consume. Right? So as per their requirement, they produce, and what the excess they produce, what they do, they after consuming, what they do, they exchange. Either they exchange in the form of money, or they exchange in the form of as a barter system. They may exchange with each other. So that's why you have to be very clear that exactly that what generally the all the societies needs. Then if you look at this cultural ecology and the economic perspective here, see the way people use their culture to adapt to their particular environment, that we are discussing cultural ecology, upon associated with subsistence strategies, what strategies they are adopting through to adopt themselves to a particular environment, because they have a different changing needs and all. So we have to understand their land use pattern, we have to understand their land tenure system, we have to understand their kinship structure, their residence, and part of the cultural codes, their ideologies that are important for how people produce the things. Because you see, unless and until you understand the people's culture, the people's cultural settings, the people's ideology, the people's kinship system, their land tenure system, their land use pattern, then you cannot understand their adaptive strategy to the local environment. See, I'm going for more a kind of in-depth. So that's why, because this is the very core philosophy of this syllabus. With a given technology in a given environment, people have to do some things certain way and not at all. that explain the cultural similarities. Because if you look into the different society, if you compare, you will find that if a given similar kind of technology is available in a particular environment and particular area, so the people behave similarly using that technology. People face different problems in different environments with different technologies, and that they explain the cultural differences. Because if you see, even the different communities living in a different regions, even though use similar kind of technology, but still, and also the different people, the peoples in a different region, they use different kind of technology. So that kind of the differences you find in the adaptation process will explain you their cultural differences also. Their subsistence strategies. If you look the starting from the very human evolutionary procedure, foraging, that is hunting gatherer, then horticultural, then pastoral, then agricultural. These are the kind of evolutionary process. And foraging, that is hunting gatherer. If you look into hunting gatherer society, generally there are very small groups, less than 100 people, organized in bands, in small groups they organize. Size is limited by food supply in that area, because whenever they divide themselves, they divide based on the food supply, the food carrying capacity of that particular area. So they divide the groups into a very small size and they live in that area. Men were primarily the hunter, while women and children gather berries, nuts and roots. Mostly what exactly happened. Now if you look into this the division of labor from the very beginning of the human evolution, you will find that the men were primarily the hunter and the women were mostly the collector. They're the gatherer. Means they used to go to the forest, they used to collect the nuts, roots, berries they used to gather. And the society was mostly the egalitarian in nature. If there was no chief, uh, a headman, he was primarily, and so the society was mostly the egalitarian. There is no such kind of very highly stratified society. Uh, Only there are some society where you can find might be maximum there is a difference that somebody will be the chief or the headman, specifically the senior most person, or the elder person is to be accepted by the entire community as a headman of that village or headman of that band, headman of that locality, because of his knowledge he has acquired through generations, because of his age, and for just to advise to the peoples and the influence in the process of survival, in the process of doing different activities. Then frequent movement mean few material goods and uh, and minimal social stratification. If you'll see that there are minimum very less social stratification was existed in the society, and the moment of goods and goods were very limited. The pedestrian, equestrian, and aquatic things was very aquatic have the most permanent settlements, because slowly the peoples who are mostly depending on fish and all, they started living in a particular regions and for collection and all these things. And then the society was mostly, then they get into the specifically here we claim the horticulture, that is called mostly the shifting cultivations. Then the distinct from the agriculture in that there is no domestication of animals was not held, mostly seen in rainforest areas, fairly egalitarian with a big man. The permanent village can sometimes be erected, requires lots of hands, as crops must be rotated each year due to farming practices, because they have to change the crops, they have to go for shifting cultivation, they have to change the crops. So as a result, only small groups can be supported in tribes. Crops are not heavily tended, no irrigation facility, no fertilizer facility, little weeding was there. Then slowly the society get into the pastoral society, range from pure pastoral nomadics to transman. Then slowly what happened, the society get into the pastoral society, the people started moving from one area to another area, and here the people require that when the people feel that it is very difficult to get the animals for hunting for the foods and all, so they then they started domestication of animals. They started because they feel that if we will go for a domestication of animals, then whenever we don't have any food, we can survive on them. And they feel that when they were doing the shifting cultivation and all, they feel that if they domesticated some animals, it may help them in their cultivation activities. And also they feel that the animals can help them in the process of communication, carrying them from one area to another area. So typically in arid or mountainous region where crops will not thrive, so they are generally in the mountain area. And also you will find that in the drought prone areas, dryland areas, generally the communities are mostly they follow the pastoral kind of things. Movement takes advantage of water sources and grazing lands. So they mostly look for the grazing lands and water sources where they can survive for a particular periods, and there nearby the water they can stay, they can do some cultivation activities, and they can find some grazing land for their domestic animals. Then hierarchy based on ownership and patriarchal tribes. So mostly the society becomes little bit they moves towards the little bit hierarchy based society, because they started the ownership of those pastoral means those animals. They started owning those animals. Then the society becomes mostly the patriarchal in nature, because male was having the muscle power of doing some agricultural activities and carrying the luggage in the through the animals and all. Some surplus of food and more reliable food sources, resulting in some division of labor and trade for other goods and all. So when they started producing something, so then they started exchanging with others. Whoever is having less particular food, so then they started exchanging. So that then the concept of trade and division of labor comes up. And when they engaged in this different kind of activities, they assigned the different peoples in the particular community to do so and so work. Slowly the concept of division of labor entered because of this changing in the local ecological system, local settings. So when here you see the changing in the ecology, the people's cultural aspect is being changed, because they are culturally trying to adopt, because these are all the division of labor, then the starting of the small trade, all these things is nothing but a cultural adaptation to the changing ecological settings. Besides dairy products and meats, animals also provided their hair, leather, then fertilizers and transportation. So it is not that they are only used these animals for the dairy product and meat. Rather, they human beings started using their hairs, leathers, fertilizers, and transportation. Means they started using the animals for different purpose. Some warfare over the pasture lands also started, because when the some people find a very good lands and all, through that the different communities who are living in another band and all, they slowly get into the different conflict, different warfare also started within them to capture those lands and stay there for long for a while. Israel, before setting in Canaan, approximately was a pastoral society. So there we have lots of examples. The nomads of Persian and all. There are lots of examples where they are the nomadic societies in peoples live in a different parts of the world. Then slowly the agricultural society come up, indicates the domestication of animals, irrigations. Usually we started using the fertilizers. The domestication was an early practice of genetic modification through selective breeding of plants and animals, resulting in crop that produced a large supply of good food but required human intervention to continue. So means the different kind, slowly the human beings started inventing the new seeds, and then they started the agriculture. They went for, because if you look, woman is considered the mother of agriculture, because when mostly the human the male get into the forest for hunting, the woman who was mostly engaged in collecting the roots and fruits, so they continuously found that there are some trees where the seeds fall down on the earth, and when it rains, then slowly the another plants used to come up from those seeds. by continuously observing that, they feel that it is we can use this, and we can collect those seeds and plants when the rain comes and when the nearby water areas. Through that, slowly it teaches the human beings how to go for the agricultural activities. Means collection of seeds, planting, then they can find the foods for their survival. The invention of plow, then use of animal to prepare field was a crucial. Means slowly for the as a cultural adaptation to the local environment. Then they invented the plow. Then they used the animals to prepare their field. Then food surplus allows for division of labor and leisure time, allowing arts and science to develop. You should look into when the agriculture came, then the art and leisure, then the mostly after the invention of this agriculture, the science and technology got developed, because when the agriculture comes out, then the concept of surplus food came up. Once the concept of surplus food came up, the people got some time, leisure time, and once they got leisure time, they started thinking of inventing something new. So then they slowly the people because of the surplus of food due to agriculture, the people got some leisure time. They enjoyed their time. Then they developed certain kind of arts and science to they develop in course of times. So try to understand how the entire human evolutionary process has been started over and how it helps. Then downfall also started, because sediments tends to result in the increased warfare and disease, much more labor intensive and all. So slowly what happened, because of certain kind of crisis and all. So sometimes the market failures happen, sometimes the people get into different conflicts, and like the diseases are coming up like swine, like the present COVID-19 kind of things. The earlier also lots of epidemic diseases come up, and so lots of people also died and all. So then when the different kind of disease come up, so the society, and you see, I'll tell you whether you are aware or not. Generally, if you go to any tribal area, you will find that mostly the tribal villages, generally the tribal households are scattered through inside the forest. They never live in a very big villages. Mostly they lives in a small bands, where their philosophy was, if any epidemic comes, so there is a high chance of death, because mostly the fatal disease science and technology was not so developed. So that's why they feel that if they live in very scatteredly, if any epidemic disease come, only one area where the small number of households survive, they may be affected. The other area, which is little far from that area, so will can be survived from that epidemics. So that's why they usually live in a very small bands, but with a little away from each other. Then slowly the industrial and post-industrial society come up. England was the first industrial society beginning in the 80s, 1800. Then still rely on the agriculture for food production, but their economic production relies primarily on machines. You will learn about the industrial revolution in details if you look in modern Owen Boss, who his writing and all. If you look into, then once the industrial society comes, then the people get into more conflict. Because here people's requirement needs becomes greeds slowly. Then economic system come up. The the provision of goods and services to meet the biological and social needs, and once a system of production, distribution, consumption of resources started, then reciprocity started, the sharing, giving items fairly equal value in exchange of other items, either immediately or at a later time. Then redistribution concept came, all goods and foods to central leadership, who, like you see, redistribution kind of things, is the present tax system also. It is a kind of redistribution. When suppose we are getting the salary from the government, then as a part of our salary we are giving some tax to the government. The government is cutting the tax, again the government is redistributing those the tax money for the benefits of the society. So like that, when the king was ruling and all, the means that during the time they used to collect the tax, they used to collect the means whatever you will produce. Generally in the redistribution system earlier, whatever crops you produce, everything you have to deposit it in the king's palace, Then as per your requirement, as you have contributed, you will get it, and the rest amount is to be distributed to other villagers, and based on like a food for work kind of things. So the market exchange come, the competitive buying and selling of commodities based on supply and demands employs some type of currency, because earlier there was a barter system, people used to exchange. Why I'm telling all these things? Because you see, these are all cultural process of adapting to the local ecology, local environment. When slowly the human being was mostly in the initial phase, it was reciprocity system was there, and because if you see that gift system, see today we are telling gift. Earlier, the gift system was very much in from the very beginning of the evolution of the human society. So when this society get into this agricultural setting and all, then during the time they started this gift system also, and because people always feel that if I am given something, so then they usually give something in exchange to somebody as a gift, as a mark of gift. And the gift usually the same kind of things the gift was mostly, they never calculate the gift in the term of value and all, but as a mark of respect they used to extend the, they used to give the gifts. But today what happened, gifts becomes a completely kind of materialistic one, and today we are not giving gift for the sake of giving a gift, rather we are always linking it to the class, how much the cost, what exactly gift X has given, accordingly we are giving the gifts. An increase in size of the society results in increase in structure, which in turn produce differences in power and roles of the members. Different members or groups of members are also start to play different and specialized role in the society. The different they did the division of the labor, and different groups of the peoples started playing a different role. And as a result, there is a movement from military to an industrial society. At the beginning, society is characterized by the compulsory cooperation of its members. The military society was there. The industrial society is characterized by the voluntary cooperation of its members. Earlier, what was happening? It was compulsory that everybody should cooperate each other for their survival. But in industrial society, it becomes a very voluntary in the nature. Either you can cooperate, not cooperate, it is completely your wish. The highest order is called the ethical state, where the common resources may be used to perfect the human character. The structural part of the society, that is family works function interdependently to help society function. Therefore, the social structure works together to preserve the society. Because you see, and then what happened when the society was very small in nature and all, so there generally the people used to cooperate with each other, because of for this they used to go for kind of barter kind of system was there, and people used to exchange their labors. It is not that they exchange only the product, rather the kinship system. You have to understand the for ecological setting, for ecological adaptation, the people mostly depends upon this kind of the kinship structure, and the mostly they take the help of kins, because if you look into understand the, so that's why I always tell that if you want to understand the culture of India, you have to understand the Indian agriculture, because Indian agriculture is a reflection of Indian culture. And in agriculture, you'll see that how the kinship plays a predominant role here in the labor exchange, because mostly the peoples living in a locality, they used to extend the labor within themselves, mostly with the keen labors, because there was very shortage of the labor, because there is no concept of money. There is even in the barter also, most of the times people don't have anything to exchange, so only they exchange their labors. So that's why mostly they used to depend on their keen labors. This quest for the meet the basic needs is central to understanding the social life, and is as true today as it was in the prehistory also. We have to understand the social history of a society. So the, then we have to when the basic needs have been met, that leads to the creation of new needs. Man is a perpetually dissatisfied animals. Try to understand. Man is a perpetually dissatisfied animal. In the industrial society, what exactly happens? When one need is fulfilled, the another needs come up. Man's struggle against nature does not cease when basic needs are gratified. So this is the major problem started, because when we are telling about the cultural ecology and how the culture and cultural ecology are linked, here you see the major problem is happening today when we are facing the problem in the cultural adaptation to the our local ecological setting. The major problem is the man struggles against the nature, because here what we are trying to seize everything. Once our needs are fulfilled, again our needs are becoming gratified and we are looking for the other needs. So this perhaps is the main reason for the ecological crisis we witness today as a result of industrialization, capitalism, production of goods and services to wide range of consumers. See, now you look into them throughout the globe. Today we are telling about the ecological crisis, because why I told all these things, you see, the same human being who was very culturally adapting to the local environment, whose culture was stepping up in a new form to adopt themselves in the new environmental setting and all, has become so complex in the today that we are forced to see the ecological crisis is coming up in the entire world due to deforestation, due to the rise of industrialization, pollution and all. Now it is very difficult for the human being to survive, and the time will come when you will not have an option, rather you have to buy the oxygen from the society, because you will go to the market and you will buy the oxygen for your survival, because due to rise of this ecological crisis, due to rise of the human needs, because human needs are becoming very grids, and I told you just now, once the human needs are fulfilled, they are looking for another needs. There is no end to its needs. So that's it, the major problem. So I'll stop here. If you have any query, you just ask. Any question?
No, sir.